All right. Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for your patience while we sorted through some last minute technical difficulties on our end. But thank you so much for joining us for this fireside chat. I'm Abhinav Kapoor, co-founder and CEO of Bicky. We're a customer data platform for restaurants. We help brands use all of their guest data to understand the impact of their marketing, menu, and operational decisions. It's my pleasure today to be joined by longtime Bicky partner, confidant, power user, Haley Hendrix from Eggs Up Grill. Haley, welcome.
Yeah, happy to be here, Abhinav.
So it's great to have you here. Obviously the focus of this conversation is going to be on how Eggs Up, given it's in the name, has been, I imagine, has not been immune to the egg crisis that we've been seeing here over the past few months. But before we dive in on how you've adjusted the menu, your LTO strategy, your positioning in the market, and how you're working with your franchise partners, just if you could give us an overview of you, your role at Eggs Up, and a bit about the concept.
Yeah, so as senior manager of guest insights and off-premise strategy, say that all in one breath. I lead projects focused on how guests engage with our restaurants, and I measure what their engagement means to our business. So this could be everything from visit and product surveys, tailored CRM campaigns, third-party delivery and catering strategies, and of course, Bicky's product features play a role from start to finish within those projects.
Yeah.
And a little bit about the brand. I joined probably 4 years ago. Yeah, exactly 4 years ago. And I've seen the growth, firsthand. When I joined, there were 47 Eggs Up Girls, and now there are 91 in
Wow.
operation today. So it's been a whirlwind, but it's been good, steady growth. So for anyone that hasn't had the pleasure of visiting an Eggs Up Grill in your neighborhood, when you take a seat at Eggs Up Grill, you'll find everyday craveable favorites like a classic breakfast with eggs, bacon, sausage, toast, you name it. Some strawberries and cream pancakes for the sweet tooth, chicken and waffles, and milk sandwiches, all on the menu. All of our eggs are cracked fresh to order, and they're served by one of your neighbors. So it really feels like you're friends with all the people that are in there at any given point in time. Each Eggs Up Grill is a small business that's owned and operated by someone in the community, which makes our 100% franchise concept feel like a lot of unique locally owned breakfast spots.
Amazing. And I love that, this ethos of local, small business, the franchise partner is part of the community and meshing the community from the community. I think that's something that y'all have done really well. I think before we even talk about sort of implications of eggs in the egg market, can you talk a little bit about positioning within the breakfast category? Obviously the breakfast category is one of, I think I heard your CEO Ricky on a podcast last week, and the host described breakfast as sort of quietly one of the hottest segments within the restaurant category. There's a lot of noise, a lot of players, it feels like, given how quickly that day part is growing. Can you talk about your value prop in the segment, your differentiation in the segment, how you think about, how Eggs Up is different from some of the other breakfast concepts out there?
Yeah. We are a better breakfast concept, but I think the heart of our brand is that community connection. And that's just where other brands don't pursue that as heavily or keep that as close to their DNA as we do.
Yeah.
So we have everything from local events in the restaurant to, hey, support the local T-ball team, fundraisers. Our franchise partners are really invested in their communities, and it shows. And it's just such a authenticity that can't be faked. That really differentiates us. But as far as innovation, menu, it's craveable favorites. It's stuff that you might experiment in your own kitchen with, and it's nothing too far, too innovative, too avant-garde. To be well loved by all of our guests.
Yeah. And I think something that y'all do really well in reinforcing both in the store, with your teams, through your marketing and your messaging, is this concept of approachable. And this is important in the context of price spikes and shortages with eggs, which again, influence such a big part of your menu. But it's this concept of everyday value. Am I thinking of it the right way? Where it's like approachable,
absolutely. Yep.
Affordable, everyday value. Yeah.
Yeah, affordable everyday value. Yeah, I think the ethos of the brand being exactly what you said, approachable, and it's all part of service. The value is the experience, right? So it's how all menu, team, and marketing all come together.
Yeah, excellent. Well, great. and this is going to be important as we talk about how you guys are responding. But I think when we were prepping for this and when we first raised the idea of doing a conversation around this, this is going to be new for me as someone who is relatively outside, certainly breakfast industry, but from outside the restaurant industry. But I think you gave me a crash course in the egg market and kind of like where it's at today. Can you walk us through the state of the egg market, what you've seen historically versus what you're seeing now? Let's start there, and then we'll start to dive in a little bit further from there.
Yeah, I remember your eyes kind of glazed over. Thinking about this, the three different types of eggs. Yeah, I would say so. So zooming all the way out, the history perspective here is the most recent avian flu outbreak kind of began in January of this year, and it's the biggest driver of this egg shortage that we're seeing and the pricing fluctuations. Kind of like the seasonal flu is in humans, it resurfaces yearly, but this time the scale was really unprecedented. 20 million birds have been affected to date. And as a result, the supply of conventional shelled eggs, these are the most widely used in food service, have really plummeted. So it sends the wholesale prices soaring. You saw that in retail, those prices also went up. Restaurants nationwide are really scrambling, pun intended, to secure eggs at a really sustainable price. Some competitors have cut egg heavy items, others have introduced surcharges, various pricing maneuvers and mechanisms, but price volatility still continues to impact operations. So there's going to be a long-term impact to this. We see breeding cycles for these egg-laying hens, typically around the 5-month mark. So to recoup from the 20 million birds that have already been lost, we're looking at a 5-month to get back to levels if we stop culling flocks at this point, but there's no indication of that.
Right. And then just put this in context, because I feel like this isn't the first time, at least since we've been working together, that there has been avian flu, there has been let's say the impact to the hen laying population. But what is it about, you mentioned the 20 million number. Can you put this in context for us? Because I feel like there was something similar maybe a year or two ago as well, if my memory serves me correctly.
Yeah, and part of that is how close together the two events are.
Got it.
So I believe there's somewhere around 300,000 egg-laying hens that produce conventional shelled eggs. So if you look at
300 million, yes, yeah.
From maybe 2022 is the latest stat. We could assume half of those since 2022 have been affected by an avian flu outbreak in the years since 2022. So every year as your population decreases, and it takes about half a year to recoup your population, these repeated hits from avian flu are really impacting, decimating the flocks.
Yeah. And then in terms of a price spike standpoint, what has that done? Maybe how much you buying, how much you typically buy from an egg standpoint, and then where have you seen the prices go to just in the last few months, as you said, since it started in January?
Yeah, I would say typical restaurants going through, it's 7 cases of about 30 dozen a week.
Oh my God.
So don't have my calculator out, but it's significant. And then you multiply it by, we're almost 100 restaurants now. So there's a real strain to our suppliers. The shift we saw was at times a doubling in price. At its worst, I would say the impact to profitability ranged anywhere around the 25% mark of what restaurants would have taken home had this increase in price not drastically affected one of our top 3 usage SKUs.
Yeah, so just right off the bat, like supply chain shock, 25% hit on margin dollars, basically, for your franchise partners.
Yeah, and the Urner Berry Index, which is the kind of the keeping a track of the marketplace for eggs wholesale. It was about $7.57 a dozen.
Wow.
Yesterday we're down to $3.70 a dozen.
Okay.
Better, but context here was this time last year the price was $1.91 a dozen.
So you're still like 2x basically, or so.
Yeah,
2x.
Still 2x.
Right.
So it's down to the breeding life cycles and the compounding effects of avian flu happening one after another. And then overall, the thing that happens is we haven't seen an ease in demand. It really took a doubling, sometimes tripling, in certain markets of the egg prices to where we were seeing people say, you know what, I can go without eggs this week.
Wow.
But for
And
us,
so,
it's not an option.
yeah, absolutely. And so at its peak, you're talking about a 3x spike in prices for
Mm.
your basically your major SKU. And then how much of the menu is influenced by eggs? Obviously, like we joked at the top, it's in the name, but like how much of the menu is actually relies on eggs, whether it's like like a center plate item or in a batter like pancakes or waffles or something like that.
Oh man, vast majority, 90% somewhere in there.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, and you're still at, like you said, even though prices are coming down and you're getting some relief, you're still at 2x basically, or roughly 2x
Mhm.
where you were last year from a pricing standpoint.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And is this unique? Like, have you guys shifted maybe the raw? Like, I was listening to something this morning, and it's talking about the market for liquid eggs and how like that supply is more stable. Have you guys adjusted at all from just like, okay, like we got to move away from shelled eggs temporarily? We have to think about moving to maybe a liquid egg. Like, is that sort of in the consideration set? Are you thinking about that? Have you done that? It'd be good to understand. Just maybe from a supply chain standpoint, how you've been responding.
Yeah. I think so. I can do a quick overview of the three kinds of eggs
Yes.
because there were options out there, and
Yeah.
it's why not everybody in the space was affected equally.
Right.
So you have your conventional shelled eggs. Those are the most affordable, widely available. These eggs experience the most volatility due to the large scale supply disruption caused by the avian flu. So this is that 300,000 hens that I was talking about earlier. They produce those conventional shell eggs. There's also the kind of more premium cage-free organic shelled eggs. You see these at the grocery store, and they're priced a little bit higher. They are traded on a distinct supply market for organic and cage-free eggs. So they saw less price impact, but they carry a higher average price point and have
Okay.
more limited supply than the conventional shelled eggs. So sorry, another pun, it's a little exclusive um, to use cage-free and organic shelled eggs. There's a limited supply of them, right?
Yeah.
And then to engage in those contracts, you would carry that premium pricing year round.
Yeah.
And then there's liquid eggs. So what happens with nature is that not every egg is made the exact same way. So some of these eggs that are not fit for retail or for wholesale, whether they be weighted a little bit under or have other imperfections, and they're below grade, they would be cracked and then they would go into measurement by weight. So they're still eggs. They're not powdered eggs. They're still eggs. They're just they had imperfect shells.
Got it.
But they are slightly less impacted in the sense that those eggs can come from they come from the same hens. So when the hen is destroyed, the flock is destroyed, you do have naturally less liquid egg. But it's all relative, right? It's a
Yeah.
statistic of how many eggs are not perfect out of a dozen.
Yeah.
Um, so it was less affected, but internally the conversation, it's do you modify recipes? Is there anything like that? And we just decided is between leadership, and we have some great franchise owner councils available that franchise partners basically help us make decisions. They talk with us to discuss through some of these issues. We just determined that wasn't compromising the value in any way or compromising what we're known for and the great quality product that we have just wasn't worth it. So
Yeah.
we still just use liquid egg in the one prep product. So it's a batter. It's our pancake and French toast batter.
Yep.
Because again, still eggs, but every egg at Eggs Up Grill is freshly cracked.
Yep. Yep.
So,
I know that. I remember the egg counter in Spartanburg, and there's like that egg counter next to the kitchen that just every time I come back and visit. Obviously, it's phenomenally higher. But
yeah,
okay.
we caught 1 million here recently.
Wow.
So that was
Wow.
fun.
Wow. We did get a question in the chat about egg surcharges. Madeline, I promise you we are coming back to. Haley and I had a long conversation about surcharges yesterday, back and forth, and how it fits with our consumer value prop. So we will address that one live, I promise you. Before we get there, and before we dive into some of the more maybe nuanced responses, can you talk about like what you've been hearing from your franchise partners? What are they saying? What are they feeling? Obviously, that 25% margin hit is huge, and of course, that's going to cause some consternation and disruption. That's impacting their real take-home dollars, especially when you have such a local ethos. It's affecting the dollars that they take home for their families. So can you talk about what you've been hearing from your franchise partners firsthand?
Yeah, I mean, I think the impetus on us was definitely to work so closely, even closer than before, with our sourcing partners and with all the resources we had. So we were, we preemptively kind of got in front of those things, and we, through Dustin, our great team member here, director of innovation and research, he secured those sourcing partnerships. We were walking hand in hand with them as we went through this in real time, and it was just reassuring to the franchise partners that this was something we were heavily monitoring, actively being a part of, and driving some conversations with suppliers.
Yep.
But overall, their businesses were there was definitely a meeting where we basically laid out all the cards, and we said, this is the situation we're in. This is the macroeconomics of it. This is how it's impacting everyone, but also at your level. So basically, franchise partners wanted some way to immediately take action as they felt it was right. So pricing and menu pricing is one of those vehicles.
Yep.
So what we did was we called a session for our franchise ownership council, which is that group that helps our leadership team come to decisions, make fully informed decisions from both sides of the fence, leadership and franchise partners. So in that meeting, we kind of explored three options for franchise partners to use pricing to recoup some of these costs that are affecting them. The first of those options was to take a surcharge on eggs. The franchise partners unanimously voted against that. They felt that was not our value proposition. It was not intuitive to the brand DNA. It didn't make sense with our concept. And there's a couple reasons behind that, but one of the reasons they noted was the feeling of nickel and diming. There's a lot of stuff out there about tip fatigue, surcharges, service charges in restauranting, and it's just not it leaves a bad taste in the mouth. Whether you've been to that restaurant 10 times or whether it's your first time, you're just like, why don't you tell me what exactly this costs?
Right.
So we just don't feel that it's the job of the consumer to pick up those costs that are affecting how this restaurant does business. So that was part of the conversation. And back to the local ownership piece, we're unique in that our franchise partners, they can often be the face of that restaurant in their community. So it's, it might be Michael's Eggs Up Grill, and they just knew that it wouldn't be a good conversation to have with guests about why, suddenly there were stickers on the menu that said, oh, if you order an egg, it's going to be X dollars more.
Yeah.
They just knew it wouldn't go in a positive place at all. Not to mention recouping the actual cost of the eggs is a very difficult economic, math to make, because percentage of mix and all that stuff basically affected pricing. So that was not an option we went with. Second option was to kind of accelerate the timeline that we typically have for menu innovation and menu launches throughout the year. So we typically do a spring and a fall menu relaunch or revisit the menu, where we do everything from publish stuff that we had in test in certain markets. They make it to the menu.
Yep.
We also can remove items based on how they move, or we do other kind of maintenance stuff to the menu during that time. It's also a great venue to take the pricing that they feel is.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah. Are you also taking the pricing during that time as well? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. As the menu changes, it makes sense to just go ahead and change your prices as the world changes. So basically, that was set for later in spring, but we decided to go ahead and move that forward a little bit. And then the third option would have been wait and see. So we have a really great pricing resource in RMS. So they in the fall menu reprint of last year, they had prescribed some menu guidance for franchise partners that would help them recoup their costs really efficiently through the menu. Mm-hmm. So that's been in place for all the franchise partners that adopted it. oh, by the way, every restaurant does their own local pricing.
That's that was going to be my question, which was,
I'm
I guess,
saying generally.
yeah, you guys lean hard into that local ethos to the point where like even the franchise partner can control the amount of price that they want to take in those situations.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So they made this guidance available to all franchise partners, and then those that did proceed and use this pricing or put their stamp on it, they still are using those prices. So
yeah,
ultimately, those franchise partners out of that meeting with leadership and the FOAC, they decided to pursue, recommend option 2. So for franchise partners that felt they needed some immediate relief and didn't want to wait till later in spring to relaunch their menu, they went ahead and did that. And that
take the
was,
price now, basically.
yeah, price now.
Yeah.
That was roughly 40% of restaurants.
Okay.
So that is the remaining 60%
Yeah.
are deciding to wait until later in spring.
Yeah.
And the reason they can do that is kind of related to that the pricing efficiencies they have with the last fall menu.
Yeah, I think honestly, this is the part of the conversation, one of the parts of the conversation that fascinates me the most, which is one, how incredibly thoughtful you approach this, again, this like external shock to the system of your key commodity. But there's a few things in there that I want to unpack, which I think were really interesting. One, less than half of the franchise partners actually decided to take price early. And as part of that, it's almost like they, again, like there's this element of local ethos, local hospitality, that value proposition or the strength of your brand carrying through to your franchisee or your franchise partner base, and them proactively saying like, look, like we totally understand what's happening outside in the world, but we don't want it to affect our guests. And it seems like that is continuing to be like just a core pillar for you and the brand overall. The second thing here, and I think related to this, was no surcharges. Like to circle back on Madeline's initial question, no surcharges, again, rooted in this ethos of a franchise partner saying, hey, like there's tip fatigue, there's service charges. We just took price like literally a few months ago. The last thing I want to do is basically put a sticker on and say, because you like the thing you like, I'm going to charge you more money for it, essentially. Is that a fair way of thinking about it?
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point about how the local ownership impacts this, we got some other feedback from franchise partners was that I know Denny's announced that they would be taking surcharge pricing at some of their locations, not all, but some.
Right.
And of course, Waffle House kind of led the way with announcing the surcharge.
Yep.
So naturally, our guests reached out to us, calling the local restaurants saying, "Are y'all doing surcharges?" And it was a really, it was a good feeling, pure to our ethos about no, we're not doing surcharges. And the guests, I'll be there in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So it just rang true that the call that was made and how the franchise partners felt about it was, that's just not us. So yeah, we feel good about that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. No, I think that's great. Again, like sort of, and then, you take price holistically when you or engineer the menu and optimize the menu holistically and do price then, as opposed to taking price, just on the back of when you just did it and then doing it again later in the year. I really like the way you framed it, which is like, look, there's efficiencies built into the menu anyway, and we recommend these efficiencies twice a year anyway. It's not like we just look at the price and we say, screw it, let's just raise prices because of what's happening in the outside world. There's a give and take there to alleviate margin or like provide extra margin in a way that just goes beyond essentially just raising the cost for the consumer. Excellent. I want to shift over to the menu portion of this because I think the thing that excited me or maybe want to have this conversation with you in the first place is I feel like, and this was a theme in 2024 where price is often just the easiest lever, right? Inflation, so I got to raise prices and price down. Like that is by far the easiest lever. But when people say value just does not mean price. Value to me is a combination, of course price is a part of it, but it's a combination of experience, service, portion size, food quality. Like, are you getting enough for the price you are paying, right? If the price is higher, but you are getting more for it, or the guest feels like they're getting more for it, then they're potentially okay paying that higher price. And I think one of the things that y'all do really well is lean into value, look for levers other than price to provide that value while still maintaining some of the integrity associated with franchisee economics. Can you talk about, like, from a menu innovation standpoint, from an LTO standpoint, how did you adjust, right? Obviously, like, the mandate is use less eggs, at least in the menu items that you have control over and have more flexibility in, which is the LTO calendar. Can you walk us through kind of how you adjusted the spring LTO calendar in response to the price shocks on eggs?
Yeah, so we insert the Friends meme pivot here. Um, so we were about 3 weeks out from our spring LTO launch. So we had the lineup, we had the menu items ready, we had all the research, we had the opcos stocked. And this hits. We're really feeling the impact. We're having those conversations with the franchise partners, and it's just becoming abundantly clear that we have a very egg centric item. Sorry, the puns.
Yeah, that's
In
great. I
our
love it.
scrambler, it's a new scrambler flavor that was going to be a premium spot on the spring LTO, and we just decided this is not going to look good. It's going to leave a bad taste in franchise partners' mouth. Guests are going to be confused because nobody doesn't know about this.
Yeah.
So we just decided to pivot. And actually, this is one of the ways we use Vicky. We are able to segment guests who had ordered. Let me zoom all the way out. We survey our guests based on like the same kind of 5 criteria, but are building a database of each menu item and its behavior and how guests feel about that on these 5 parameters. So one of those parameters being literally value. It's a value question. The other one is presentation, portion, all that kind of stuff to kind of get at how do guests feel about this item. So we have a survey out there that's powered by Vicky because we can target guests who had ordered any of these scrambler profile flavors, in addition to the new spring LTO scrambler that was slated, people that had ordered that while it was in test. So we had some really great data behind how did people feel about the portion of egg in this dish. How did people feel about the value of the item as it was priced in the restaurants in test? So we put all that together and benchmarked it against what we knew about the other scrambler items. Because I think the first thing you think is there a way to modify the recipe and maybe save some cost there, use less egg? We actually found that no, the recipe is built exactly as it should be because it's so every scrambler. This is interesting. Every scrambler uses like a 3 egg approach. So there's 3 eggs in each recipe, but we typically add like a protein onto it. So there's a cravocado, there's a chorizo, there was this one we were testing, and then there's just like a veggies, kind of a Greek one.
Yeah.
And that one scored lowest on the proportion of egg in the dish question. So it was funny, when a protein was present, they felt that the amount of egg was adequate, and when a protein wasn't present, other than eggs, they felt that it was inadequate.
Yeah.
So
they weren't vegetarians like me, where it's like this is all we can get, basically.
Yeah. And then the value question, no changes there. I think it was a good value. It's a great taste. It's part of the great experience. So we didn't have any takeaways from that, but we knew we couldn't alter the recipe without changing, the outcome.
Yeah.
And the other thing was, and this is just an LTO engineering standpoint, we had some multi-use SKUs in that LTO as it was built when it was supposed to be launching.
Yeah.
So we pulled
it was a steak LTO, I believe, right?
Yeah. So when we pulled this one item, we had to pull the other item, and then we just had one item left. And we said, well, we can't launch an LTO with one item.
Yeah.
So we quickly pivoted. We looked at our menu, we looked at our mix, and we saw, what are some flavors that, what can we keep? What was an innovation that we could speed up? What's just a good seller and a good draw? So it's out now, but it's we have our BLT, which is great. Love that crispy Tuscan bread and crispy BLT. And then we have the blueberry white chocolate chip pancakes. We have our croissant donuts, which are so great. And then we have our vanilla sweet cream cold brew. So
nice. Was there anything from a menu item retention or menu item frequency standpoint? I think you did I appreciate you giving us the shout out on segmentation, empowering the service. Was there anything from a menu item retention or menu item frequency standpoint that you saw that I guess gave you more confidence in launching these specific flavors or these specific items from an LTO standpoint?
Yeah, that's a question that came up as we think about how we're going to analyze this test. So this is something kind of moving forward. We can use the Vicky tools that we have for PMIX for retention. but we know historically from other LTOs that the home runs, if you will, of LTOs are the ones that have, better retention among new guests,
Great.
because that's exactly what you want is, a regular guest or a loyal guest comes in on their cadence, and it's kind of hard to move them. Every marketer's dream is to move them into a higher frequency. But if you get a new guest and you get them coming back more and they were really enjoying this one item, that's something that you could bring back again and again.
Yeah, that's excellent. And then I think one thing that's always top of mind from a LTO or menu standpoint is something around going back to the maybe around 40% of folks that took price earlier, and at least before these LTOs arrive. Is there anything that you noticed in your PMix around check management, trade up, trade down, anything like that you saw within that 40% bucket that did take the price earlier, or did chose to increase their prices earlier? Any kind of like residual effects that you saw from the price increase?
Yeah, we are still in kind of the really early stages. Our sample size isn't quite where I want it to be, because we have it takes a little while to print the menus, of course. So we have only about 2 weeks of data, pretty early days, for some of the restaurants that did take pricing early on. So don't have anything to report on that front yet, but we anticipate, anytime price is taken, you're probably going to see a drive in check average or per person average, just naturally by virtue of taking price. We have a kind of an interesting approach to taking price that we look at an effective price, in the sense that we balance pricing with the weight of that item in the PMix. Best example is like if you take 5 cents on a coffee, you're going to make a whole lot more money in sales if you were to take 2 cents on an eggs Benedict, or 5 cents on an eggs Benedict, and it's just by volume. So when we analyze pricing and the impact of taking pricing at certain times of the year, that's how we do it. It's an effective price. So we don't just say blanket, boost everything by 3% or 2%. It's more like, well, the effective price was 1.2% because of how items moved.
Yeah, because of the ranges.
It's all the conversation about check management and all that other macroeconomic trends that we're seeing.
Yeah. And then as you think about the new sort of calendar of items, again, leans more savory, less egg heavy. What does your promotion strategy look like? How do you drive excitement around those? How do you ensure that they resonate with guests? And then you talked a little bit about measuring success with like retention of first-time guests. Maybe walk us through high level what the marketing playbook looks like now that you have the new, LTO window set and what the items are.
Yeah, I think the page in the playbook that this egg crisis is kind of written for us is backup plan. Not that we anticipate this would happen to the same scale in a future year, but there's, it very well could. So I think the innovation here is behind. We've had a renewed focus on some beverages, so you may see some new creative mimosa flavors coming out and some new vehicles, shall we say, regarding mimosas and alcohol in the restaurant.
Just hand out shots, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, and then specialty coffee, some innovation there. Seeing some more, just expanding the offerings there and seeing what else we can use those espresso machines to make drinks that our guests really enjoy. And then we'll also probably do a little bit of lunchtime drink fun. So that could be anything from like some flavored teas that we're exploring. Being in the Southeast, sweet tea is everything. So really looking forward to that. But balancing, innovation with non-entree items, specifically for LTOs, makes a lot of sense for us.
Yep. Is there anything in this LTO window that's similar to prior LTO windows that you've done? When you think about the makeup of the items or the emphasis on non-entree items, does this have a callback to maybe something you've done in your previous, few years that you've been with the brand? Or are we just like in uncharted territory for both the focus of the items, the number of the items? Is this kind of just like brand new uncharted territory for you because you just don't have an egg dish period, essentially?
I think probably without trying, we may have had a similar LTO in the sense that it's eggless
Okay.
in the past. But I think the skeleton we build our LTOs around is kind of, if you will, this is how I interpret it. It's like something sweet, something savory, a fun beverage to have at that occasion. And then the newest kind of thing in recent months and recent iterations of LTOs is to have that kind of breakfast or brunch appetizer. So it took the form of donuts this time. It could have been
Yeah. Yeah.
a muffin last time, or it could have been something unknown, something brand new.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. And then maybe rounding out the LTO or menu conversation here, what you touched on it a little bit, but what does a successful LTO look like? What are the metrics that you care about? I know obviously this window is, as you said, a pivot in response to sort of this external price shock and supply shortage. But maybe walk us through what your scorecard of what a successful LTO actually looks like, and so we can get a sense for how you're grading, this pivoted spring LTO window.
Yeah, so I think another Bicky nugget we've learned here is when we think about LTOs, we know they drive traffic with new guests. We know from our CRM reports that anytime we message about an LTO, it gets fantastic open rates. It gets really great engagement. People are eager to hear about like what new things XUp has to offer.
Yeah.
So we knew that going in is that LTOs resonate really, really great with our guests and especially with new guests. So that's kind of one of the standards we hold it by is how did it do at attracting new guests? Vicky helps us figure that out, and then we can also benchmark against prior LTOs to see did one item drive that even more. If we had blueberry pancakes this time and we had strawberry pancakes last time, is it the difference between the fruits? Is it something altogether different? Just having access to that data is helpful.
Yeah.
The other kind of yardstick we use is, of course, margin. Probably should have talked about that first, but is we set up all the recipes with efficiencies in I'll take the scramblers, for example. We were going to introduce a new flavor for the spring LTO, but the scramblers platform was an LTO at one point in time. So its solve was more operational, and it was for efficiencies in the kitchen in comparison to an omelet. So more efficiencies in making scrambled eggs there. So the solve for that LTO was more, we had an operational yardstick of did it improve efficiency? Was it easier to execute? Did the weight of how many people ordered a scrambler overcome, the weight of people that ordering an omelet? It got down to grill space conversations.
Yeah. Like literally like space on the grill as you're making them. Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So it just depends on what each one solves for. But typically, the yardstick we're using is it driving new guest traffic? Is it bringing up frequency for loyal guests? Are they seeing, are we seeing a return to the restaurant in light of the news that's unusual for their frequency?
Yeah.
Amazing. In a good way.
Yeah. That's excellent. So just a housekeeping note to the audience here. I'm going to ask Haley one, possibly two more questions, and then we would love for you to start dropping in your questions as well. And Haley is kind enough to answer them live. So Haley, if we again step back, I appreciate you walking through sort of the response to the egg crisis. If we take a step back and let's look beyond the spring LTO window, and let's look beyond the April menu overhaul, whether it's price increases, whether it's engineering. Overhaul is probably the wrong word, but refresh, let's call it the April menu associated refresh. Where are we, call it in the fall when we're getting ready? It's September. There's another sort of late fall price change on the horizon, or menu engineering change on the horizon. Where do you think we are from an egg supply standpoint? Is your LTO calendar back to normal at that point? Is the supply back to normal? And are we sort of back to business as usual? And this is sort of a one-time shock that we can say, man, we lived through it, and now it's time to sort of like keep going and business as usual. How are you guys thinking about that internally on when you start to see some level of normalization? As I know prices have started to moderate a bit, as we said.
Yeah. I think the conversation is around innovation is that assuming normalcy, assuming a return to normalcy, this is how we'd proceed with innovation. For instance, spring LTO, we shifted that steak scrambler and the accompanying sandwich to more of a summertime slot. So it was kind of knowing that our brand is so nimble and we can adapt so fast, we can pivot on 3 weeks notice for a brand wide launch of something. It gives us a little more oomph to say, let's proceed with our plan, and then knowing that we can pivot and still put together a really great product that doesn't feel slapped together. We just have that in our back pocket. So we've moved everything back into the regularly scheduled programming. As far as summer LTO, fall LTO, even.
Okay. Good.
But I think there was another point, but yeah, I think we're assuming normalcy. You had mentioned the egg prices. I know I had said earlier they're about at the $3 mark or so, and this time last year they were more like $2. So we're not out of the woods yet, and I would say the near term, what everybody in the industry is kind of white knuckling through, is another annual occurrence, is the Easter impact on eggs. So we typically see it's like just the timing. So Easter's later in April this year, but we typically you can chart the CPI index of eggs and see when Easter is.
Demand is going to surge. Yeah.
But it always raises prices because demand is increased, right? People are making deviled eggs, people are dyeing eggs. So we're all kind of waiting through that to make that final call on, is this the new normal on egg pricing? Are we going to have to wait beyond that 5-month mark for when we typically see flocks regenerate? So we're just knowing that we have contingency plans in place. We have a really nimble team and a really great relationship with all of our vendors. So
yeah, excellent. Well, I think that's a cautiously positive note for us to end on here. Happy to open it up to any questions that we have in the chat. Please feel free to jump in if you do. We'll give it a few seconds here as see if folks drop stuff in. It's interesting. The more I learn about this topic and this industry, the more fascinated I am by it. Like the Easter impact, I didn't even think about. We're 4 to 5 weeks out from Easter, basically.
Yeah.
And so it's like you're already looking at. Are you expecting prices to go up again from where they are now? I guess it has to, just by laws of supply and demand, right? It's like supply is low and demand is going to get worse. So you're dealing with a shock basically for the 6 months of the year. Is kind of how I think about it, right?
Yeah.
So not a cautiously optimistic note to end on. Apologies, but I think there's no other comments in the chat, so we'll leave it here. Haley, this was excellent. I'm very appreciative of your time. Appreciative of you walking us and folks dialing in or watching this on demand through the current state of the egg market, and how I think you and the team and your franchise partners have done a fantastic job of keeping your brand ethos center, your value prop center, your differentiation within the category front of mind, and bringing all of those things to bear. Like, you're really tested in times of crisis, and I think you all have done a fantastic job just being true to who you are and being true to your guests more than anything. So appreciate you, and thanks again for joining us.
Yeah, thanks. This is great.
Cool. Thanks, everybody. Be well.